This is the kind of story that makes you question everything about the PGA Tour right now. A US Open champion, one of the most loyal players to stay when LIV came calling, stood up in public and told the truth about what he saw happening. And instead of ignoring him or handling it privately, the CEO of the PGA Tour stepped in and publicly shut him down. Not behind closed doors, not through a spokesperson, Brian Rolapp himself responded directly to Wyndham Clark's words. That alone is rare, but what makes this truly jaw-dropping is what came next. 47 players, frozen. Their status on the tour suddenly uncertain. Their careers caught in a system that nobody fully understands yet. Clark isn't the only player asking questions. He's just the only one brave enough to say it out loud. So why did Rolap feel the need to publicly respond to Clark? And what exactly did Clark say that forced the CEO's hand? More importantly, who are these 47 players, and what does frozen actually mean for their futures? This isn't about one comment or one disagreement. This is about the entire structure of professional golf shifting underneath everyone's feet. If you're a real fan who follows this week after week, you know the tour has been walking a tightrope for years. But this moment feels different. This feels like the point where somebody finally drew a line. Here's my take. Clark had every right to speak up. He stayed loyal when others left. He earned that right. But do you agree? Or do you think he crossed a line? Let me know in the comments. And if you actually care about what's happening behind the scenes on the PGA Tour, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of fans who want the real conversations, not the polished press releases. But what exactly did Clark say that forced Rolap's hand? His words were direct hits at the tour's credibility. Before we get into exactly what Clark said, you need to understand who we're talking about here. Wyndham Clark isn't some random player looking for attention. This is a US Open champion. He won at Los Angeles Country Club in 2023, beating Rory McIlroy head-to-head on one of the biggest stages in golf. That alone gives him credibility. But here's what makes his words carry even more weight. When LIV Golf came calling with insane money offers, Clark said no. He turned them down. He stayed loyal to the PGA Tour when some of the biggest names in the sport walked away. He believed in the tour's future. He trusted the system. And now, after watching Brooks Koepka get welcomed back like nothing happened, Clark is asking a question that a lot of other players are thinking but too afraid to say out loud. What was the point of staying loyal if the tour is just going to let everyone come back anyway? Clark made a decision that cost him tens of millions of dollars. He sacrificed guaranteed money because he believed in the integrity of the PGA Tour. And now he's watching players who left get a red carpet rolled out for their return. That's not just frustrating. That's a slap in the face to every player who stayed. And honestly, if you're a fan who's been paying attention, you've probably felt this tension building for months. The tour keeps changing rules. They keep making exceptions. They keep promising one thing and doing another. It's exhausting to follow. Clark has had enough. He's not the type of guy to stay quiet when something feels wrong. Remember what happened at Oakmont last year? After missing the cut at the US Open, he smashed his locker in frustration. Photos leaked. He got banned from the property until he completed anger management counseling. That's the kind of competitor we're dealing with here. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. He doesn't hide how he feels. So when he sat down for that interview, you knew he wasn't going to hold back. And he didn't. What he said wasn't just emotional venting. It was calculated. It was specific. And it targeted the one thing the PGA Tour has been trying to avoid talking about: the loophole. The system that lets players leave, make a fortune, and then walk right back in like they never left. That's what Clark exposed. And that's exactly why Rolap had to respond. So what did Clark actually say? His words were simple but devastating. Clark sat down on SiriusXM PGA Tour radio on a show called Gravy and the Sleaze. And he didn't just make a casual comment. He went straight for the throat. He started by talking about Brooks Koepka's return to the tour. Koepka, who left for LIV, played in Saudi-funded events, and then came back through the returning member program. Clark looked at that situation and said something that shook the entire golf world. He said, and I'm quoting directly here, "And if you would have told me that I could have gone for a year and a half, make a boatload of money and then be able to come back, play on the tour, I think almost everyone would have done that." Read that again. He's not just criticizing the tour's decision. He's pointing out a fundamental flaw in their logic. If players can leave, make life-changing money, and then return with no real punishment, what was the point of anyone staying in the first place? Clark turned down Liv's money because he believed the tour had a moral and competitive standard. He thought loyalty mattered. He thought leaving had consequences. But Koepka's return proved that wasn't true, and Clark made sure everyone heard him say it. Think about the weight of that statement. This isn't some anonymous player griping in the locker room. This is a major champion, a guy who just won the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson, publicly calling out the system that's supposed to protect the tour's integrity. He's basically saying, you made me look like a fool for staying. And if you're a fan, you've probably wondered the same thing. Why should players be punished for leaving if the tour is just going to let them back in? Why should the guys who stayed be penalized financially and competitively? Clark exposed the hypocrisy, and the timing couldn't have been worse for the tour. Because just days after Clark made these comments, the PGA Tour announced something that made his argument even stronger. They revealed that the returning member program was only open to 4 players: Brooks Koepka, Jon Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, and Cameron Smith. That's it. 4 players got the golden ticket. 4 players got to leave, make hundreds of millions, and then come back. Everyone else? Frozen out. But here's the twist. The tour set a deadline for those 3 players to return, February 2nd, 2026. All 3 said no. They're staying with LIV. So now the tour has a program that only 1 player used. What happens now? Clark said, I just hope they stick with that and they don't waver on that, maybe in like a year or 2. He's publicly doubting the tour's word. He's saying, I don't trust you to keep your promises. That is a massive deal. A sitting player, a major champion, questioning the integrity of the CEO. And you better believe Brian Rolapp heard it. When a player like Clark speaks out like that, most CEOs would handle it quietly. A private conversation, a phone call, maybe a statement through a spokesperson. But Rolap didn't do any of that. He went public. He stepped in front of the cameras and directly responded to Clark's accusations. His response wasn't defensive. It wasn't emotional. It was calculated. And it made one thing crystal clear. Koepka's return was a one-time deal, a special exception, not a precedent, not an invitation for others. Rolap made sure everyone understood that the returning member program was exactly what it said, a program with a clear deadline and no promise of future availability. He said, once the door closes, there is no promise that this path will be available again. That's a direct message to players like Clark. This is done. It's over. Don't expect it to happen again. But here's where it gets interesting. Rolap didn't just make a statement and walk away. He laid out exactly what Koepka gave up to come back. Koepka forfeited his PGA Tour equity. That's worth somewhere between $50 and $85 million. He's not eligible for FedEx Cup bonus money in 2026, and he agreed to donate $5 million to charity. That's a massive penalty. In any other context, you'd say Koepka paid a heavy price to return. But Clark's argument isn't about whether Koepka paid enough. His argument is about the principle. The tour shouldn't have allowed it at all, because once you let one player back, you're admitting that leaving wasn't really a permanent decision. You're admitting that loyalty didn't matter. And that's exactly what Rolap's response confirmed. He basically said, yes, we made an exception for Koepka. Yes, it was a special case. No, we won't do it again. But Clark isn't convinced. Neither are a lot of other players, because if the tour can make one exception, they can make another. That uncertainty is exactly what's causing the current chaos. The players don't know what the rules are. The tour keeps changing them. And the 47 players who are now frozen are the living proof that this system is broken. So who are these 47 players? And why are they frozen? The answer goes deeper than just LIV defectors. The term frozen isn't an official PGA Tour phrase. It's what players and insiders have started calling a group of golfers who are stuck in limbo. They can't move forward. They can't go back. They're just waiting. And it's happening because of the new competitive structure the tour announced for 2028. Starting that year, the PGA Tour will be split into 2 separate series: the Championship Series for the top players, and the Challenger Series for everyone else. There will be promotion and relegation between them, just like a soccer league. Finish in the top spots in the Challenger Series, and you get promoted to the Championship Series. Finish in the bottom of the Championship Series, and you get relegated down. That's a huge change. It means that about 47 players are currently in a holding pattern. They don't know which series they'll end up in. Their status isn't guaranteed. Their opportunities aren't clear. And their careers are caught between the old system and the new one. But that's not the only group of frozen players. There are also the LIV defectors who are suspended or banned. Pat Perez is suspended from PGA Tour events until 2027. That's a long time to sit out. Henrik Stenson is another one. He's waiting out his suspension, hoping to return eventually, but there's no clear timeline for him either. And then there's the group of players who were eligible for the returning member program but chose not to use it. Rahm, DeChambeau, and Smith. They turned down the chance to come back. They're staying with LIV, which means they're frozen out of the PGA Tour indefinitely. But here's what makes this really matter. Clark isn't just fighting for himself. He's fighting for those 47 players caught in the middle. He's fighting for the guys who stayed loyal but now find themselves in a system that doesn't value loyalty. And he's fighting for the fans who are tired of watching their favorite tournaments lose their best players. Because that's exactly what's happening right now. And if you think that's not a big deal, look at what just happened at Colonial. The Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial Country Club is an 80-year-old tournament, one of the most respected events on the tour. And this year, it lost Brooks Koepka, Scotty Scheffler, Jordan Spieth, and Wyndham Clark himself. All of them withdrew. The field was gutted. The reason is simple. Players are prioritizing the signature events and the majors. They're not showing up for the traditional tournaments anymore. Colonial, a historic event, became a casualty of the modern schedule. That should scare every golf fan. If a tournament with that much history can lose its stars, what's next? What other events are going to suffer? The answer is probably more than we want to admit. That brings us back to Clark's original argument. The system is broken. Players don't trust the tour. The rules keep changing. And the fans are the ones who lose. They don't get to see the best players compete at the best venues. They don't get to see the drama of a full field. They get watered-down tournaments and empty leaderboards. Now, here's the crazy part. Clark isn't against the tour's future. He actually praised the 2028 changes. He said, "I think it's the necessary and best changes. Brian Rolapp and his team have done an amazing job." That's right, he supports the new format. He thinks promotion and relegation is a good idea. He thinks the Championship Series and Challenger Series will make the tour stronger. But he also thinks the tour is making mistakes in the transition. He thinks the loophole for LIV players is a problem. He thinks the tour is inconsistent. And he's willing to say it out loud, even if it makes the CEO uncomfortable. That's why this story matters. It's not about one angry player. It's about a fundamental tension inside the PGA Tour. The players want stability. The tour wants flexibility. And those two things are pulling against each other. The 47 frozen players are caught in the middle. They don't know where they stand. They don't know if they'll be in the Championship Series or the Challenger Series. They don't know if their careers are about to take off or come to a crashing halt. And that uncertainty is dangerous. It creates anxiety. It creates resentment. And it creates situations like Clark speaking out publicly, forcing the CEO to respond. This isn't going to be resolved quickly. There will be more comments, more controversy, more players speaking up, because the tour hasn't addressed the core issue, the issue of fairness. If the tour wants to keep its best players, it needs to prove that loyalty matters. It needs to prove that players who stayed aren't going to be penalized. It needs to prove that the rules apply to everyone, not just the exceptions. So where does that leave us? It leaves us watching. It leaves us paying attention. And it leaves us wondering who's going to speak up next. Clark already did. Others are thinking about it. You can bet that Rolap and his team are bracing for more criticism. This isn't a story that ends with one interview or one response. This is a story that's going to develop over months, maybe years. The 47 frozen players are just the beginning. The new format is just the beginning. And Clark's comments are just the beginning. The PGA Tour is changing. The players are trying to figure out what that change means for them. The fans are trying to figure out what that change means for the game. And the leadership is trying to figure out how to keep everyone happy. So far, they're not succeeding. If they were, Clark wouldn't have spoken up. The frozen players wouldn't be stuck in limbo, and Rolap wouldn't have felt the need to publicly shut down a major champion. That's not a sign of a healthy system. That's a sign of a system under pressure, and the pressure isn't going away anytime soon. So the question for you is this. Do you think Clark was right to speak up, or do you think he should have kept his mouth shut and trusted the process? Because that's really what this comes down to. Trust. Clark doesn't trust the tour, and the tour doesn't seem to trust the players enough to be transparent with them. That's a recipe for disaster. If you're a real fan, you should be paying attention. The decisions being made right now are going to shape professional golf for the next decade. The players are making it clear that they're not going to be silent about it. Clark started something. Whether you agree with him or not, you have to respect his willingness to stand up for what he believes. He's not just talking about himself. He's talking about the 47 players who are frozen. He's talking about the players who stayed loyal. He's talking about the fans who deserve better. And he's not backing down. Here's my challenge to you. Drop a comment and tell me if you're on Clark's side or Rolap's side. And if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of fan this channel is for. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, this story is far from over.